All right, how you guys doing? So had my midterm today, everything went great. Presentation yesterday, everything went great that I'm confident in everything. So the week is over. The week is over. We're back to some regular scheduled programs tomorrow, God willing. Today we got another reading of Genesis, just getting through it, just getting through it. And yeah, hopefully I can be back to my reviews tomorrow and life will be good. Life is always good though. I did leave Bible study, so I got the word in. It was talking about actually, let's talk about that. Let's talk about that. So it was titled, Are You a Crazy Christian? And in the beginning, right, my friend, he opened with the line, what would it mean to be a crazy Christian? And then to me, right through my own personal experience, I said maybe being a creationist, right? A lot of people seem to deem that whether they're in the world or in the Christian community, right? Because Christian isn't necessarily the gotcha point, right? But there's like Christian, which is already some see as being crazy. But then there's the crazy aspect. And it's a little bit has some nuance to it, right? It has a little bit of nuance to it because you can be a crazy Christian, but who are you a crazy Christian to? Because there's a difference between a crazy Christian to a world person, a person of the world, and there's a difference between a crazy Christian to a believer, right? So there's believers who are crazy Christians to other Christians, and then there are Christians who are crazy Christians to people of the world. And a lot of worldly people would say that any average Christian may be a crazy Christian because it's like science is so much proof. How could you believe Jesus and all this stuff? And then right? And then that's what they say. And then there's Christians who may believe some extreme crazy things, and some Christians are sitting there like, "How can you believe that if you hate me?" And you're just like, "I can't help you if I can't help you, right? But God can, so He will do it. You just gotta let Him, right?" But from my experience, Christian or non-Christian, being a creationist has, you know, gotten into some hot water. Nothing crazy, nothing crazy, nothing insulting or anything, minus the random off-putting YouTube comments, right? But overall, it's just been met with a lot of weird energy, which is interesting because Jesus believed these things are history and talks about being the second Adam. How can you be the second of something that never existed, right? But not only that, you trace the lineages through these people. If not, then these are just some random two people on the earth at the time that just so happened to claim they were the first two people and claim they lived in the garden and claim the snake deceived them and claim that that's how he got sin and everything like that. And to me, that just doesn't check out because you know everything fit inside everything and it just works out the way it does with that story, and it sets the guideline right for the whole Genesis account, which sets the guideline for the Exodus account, the Levitical account, Deuteronomy, Numbers, Joshua, Elijah, Ezekiel, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Kings, Chronicles, Proverbs, Psalms, what's Ecclesiastes. What I'm saying? It sets the stage for all these different things, and Micah and Obadiah and Zephaniah, and that's not what it is, Zechariah, and what I'm saying, Amos and Hosea. Sets the stage for all these men to come and talk about prophecies that our Savior is gonna say and is gonna come fulfill, which he does. And that junk don't happen without this junk being the literal history that built the backbone for these people to exist in a time period where they can talk about what's gonna come in another time period. Not to mention all the different ways that God's hand has played a role in all these things, such as David, right? David, Solomon, all these different things, Abraham and Sarah, which we're reading in our little Genesis story and everything, and literally birthing friggin' Isaac gets his name changed to Israel, which dang near gets on the whole trajectory of the nation and the tribes and everything like that, which is, literally the start of what we believe, because David traced his lineage back to then, and Jesus traced his lineage back to David. So by that sense, doesn't that have to be history? Is that not what that is? And Abraham traced his lineage to Cain and Abel, or to Cain, I should say, or Seth, or whichever son, but all in all, Adam and Eve, you know, and you're just sitting here like it's gotta be, or my bad, Noah, to Noah, right? And the flood, like, come on now, the flood that happened, you know, The random spurts of history that talk about these things and these landmarks, and it's just like, come on. But anyway, that's a little rant. Back to the topic of being a crazy Christian. So, by the world standards, right, doing things like forgiving our enemies, but not only going so that far, right? Because we forgive, or lest we not be forgiven. Stuff like blessing those who curse us, rejoicing always, praying without ceasing, counting it joyous when we're persecuted. Stuff like this that anybody would say, that's got to be masochism, right? Because in truth, who would want to count it joyous when they're persecuted? Who would want to feel pain or suffer some type of trauma or suffering and all these things and just say, God, thank you so much for these things which are bringing me discomfort, because that proves that my faith in you is true? Like, huh? This thing that you have faith in, right? Have faith that you know him without seeing or believing. You haven't seen or believed in this thing, and you're happy that you're getting persecuted for his sake, right? And to a lot of people that say that's a reasonable take. Not seeing and believing something and being happy when you're persecuted from it, that's something crazy. But also, if you're gonna say you haven't seen or believed this thing, the person persecuting you doesn't believe in this thing, and the person executing you for it, and you're counting it happy because this thing preserved text that says you should count happy when you're persecuted for the sake. They're not realizing they're kind of proving his point by persecuting you for his sake. You know what I'm saying? So it's kind of like a double negative and cancels itself out in a way, in a sense, right? But even then, that logic is crazy. People, when they say there's tons of biblical contradictions, and then when we say, well, because of this, this, and this, it really, like, it's not a contradiction, more so as it builds upon itself. And a lot of people say that's crazy, that don't exist. A lot of people, when they say, yeah, just because it was written, the Gospels were written after the time of Jesus, doesn't make them more or less historically accurate. A lot of people say that's crazy, right? But I heard this really good example. We still be talking to World War II veterans, X some years after they done served, and they still popping out with new stories every time. You know what I'm saying? Random people that ain't never got interviewed popping out with a random story, hitting news. World War II veteran shares this thing. Like, how do you know that's true? Were the men them that was walking around with him saying that was right? You know what I'm saying? But he had men them walking around with him. We got historical records of the people that was with him. That we got historical record of him. And people want to call us crazy. Like, come on now. Come on now. Use that same scale that measured against it. Oh, wait. Don't pluck out my speck when you got a plank in your eye. And you also want to talk about the different phrases that we still use that's steeped in biblical usage. Steeped in biblical history and tradition. Right? The blind can't lead the blind. Where you think that come from? So many other terminologies. There was a list of like 300 that we saw in one video. That's crazy. You know what I'm saying? Because this was culture. This was what people believed, and this is what people experienced, right? The accounts of people healing people in Jesus' name. That just don't happen. Nobody in their right mind just puts their hands on a man and says, I heal you in the name of Jesus, and that person gets healed. That's a crazy experience. But does that not make that craziness a little bit true? If it happens on multiple accounts, multiple witnesses, multiple occasions, I don't know. I'm just letting you figure this out, right? This ain't for me to tell you what to believe. I'm just saying, right? Am I the crazy one if I choose to believe the evidence that I've seen and experienced in my own life? Right? I done dealt with a lot of things that a lot of people would have problems switching from. I done dealt with a lot of things that I had problems switching from. But I can tell you who got in my life and who switched it. I can tell you who came in my life and made it easier, but also harder, because now I have to fight that temptation through the power of him that's working inside me. That's not me, right? I've seen a lot of people I know they got changed from a whole bunch of host of different things, right? You tell somebody, yo, you're not the same when I remember you, bro. You was not the same dude that I liked back then, that I hung out with back then, that was rolling with back then. And it's like, of course not. Found Jesus Christ. He changed my life. You know, and a lot of people that sound crazy, because how you ain't seen and believe in this Jesus dude, and how is he dead and alive at the same time, and his word is dead and alive at the same time? How can you choose to hate your mother and father or brother or sister for this man that you don't know, that died 2,000 some years ago? I don't know. But I can also ask, conversely, isn't it crazy that we base our whole time system off of when he died.